Welcome everyone to the afternoon session. And how's your reunion so far? It's great. I can feel the energy. This is the last session, and I see so many people, so much energy. My name is Leon Bian. I'm STM class of 2005. This is my 20th reunion. As a member of the MIT Sloan Alumni Board, it's my pleasure to introduce our next session, Ideas Made to Matter. Our guest speakers will join us to share their stories of great impact in short TED-style talks that will leave you inspired and proud of the collective MIT Sloan alumni community. First up, I'm pleased to welcome Andrew Meyerson, AMBA 15. Andrew is the founder and executive director of Haymakers for Hope. Since its inception, Haymakers has raised over $35 million for cancer research, care, and survivorship. Under Andrew's leadership, they have given an unparalleled once-in-a-lifetime boxing experience to over 1,500 people, expanded to multiple cities, and grown a charity running program with bibs in all major marathons. Prior to Haymakers, Andrew was an entrepreneur in residence with Accomplice VC and spent 5 years at Goldman Sachs. As a former marathon runner, I'm looking forward to hear Andrew's story. Let's welcome Andrew to the stage.
Well, the marathoning is kind of funny because we started this because we didn't want to run a marathon. Hi everyone, I'm Andrew. He just said all that. We only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to do a pretty quick overview. You all can look up Haymakers for Hope if you want, I'm sure. But really what I want to talk to you about is community and cultivating community. And a user experience. And so, yes, we're using boxing as the conduit for that, but I think there are a lot of lessons that can be learned about what we do and how we do it. And then I'll kind of wrap this up with an example of someone who recently has gone through our program and really shows like the amazingness of what it has become. And I'll be the first to admit, I had absolutely no idea that it would become this or have this kind of impact, both in the dollars raised and on the people that it affects. Thought it would just be like this cool thing to do on the side of your corporate boob job, and it just has kind of become something that is really taken over my life in a really positive way. Haymakers for Hope it's a nonprofit. It organizes high-end, white-collar charity boxing events for cancer research. So we're fighting for a cure. The idea is it's complete and total novices. So anybody in this room could sign up on our website. We would then pair you with a gym and a trainer and put you through a 4-month boxing training program, which really breaks down the barrier to entry into the world of boxing for you. We do all the things where you have your own custom fundraising page. We have a community manager who kind of manages your journey throughout the 4 months. At the midway point, we actually have you spar your proposed opponent, so that way there's full transparency on who you're fighting. The reason we do things like that are when you're doing something that is so off the deep end, your first reaction is, am I going to die? Am I going to get hurt, right? Like, are they like, oh, Andrew's really nice. I heard him at this talk, and like, I'm gonna sign up for his thing, and it's gonna be really cool. But like, and I'm sure he has my best interest at heart, but what if he doesn't, right? What if he's putting me against Mike Tyson? And so that is really just there to show you that like you're going against another person who you're evenly matched with. And then the second part of your journey is about selling tickets to this gala event that is organized, raising as much money as you can. And really, I think, a lot of people that do this are type A, and, at the midway point, if it's an even fight then really it's just about who's gonna work harder. And so, that's what we do, but I think the really cool thing about, and yes, like the money that's raised is amazing, but I think the really like lasting, unique thing about it is that we have a really, really strong, what we call alumni community. And that alumni community has real stickiness and real staying power. And so we've had people, we just had an event a few weeks ago, we had people that fought in our first event in 2011, came and we had a little party for them at the event, and the first thing that they all say to me is like, why did you make me do this when this sucked? Now this is so cool, right? Everyone gets their own intro video and it's so much fun. But I think one of the reasons why there is real stickiness or staying power with the community is because of the cause focus, right? And I think when, we offer a product and give a service that people want, right? And there's more people that want to do it than we have space for. We offer this really awesome white glove service because when we started this, boxing gyms were not accessible. And we really thought about creating a triple win situation. So not just a win-win, but a win-win-win. And the idea being there that you had all these people who, really wanted a challenge. They just didn't really know what that next challenge was. And then it was, this skinny, unassuming looking guy on my trading desk is boxing and fighting. I'm an athlete, I could do it too, I just don't know how to get started. And so, it was, can we give these people an experience that they wouldn't otherwise have? Can we act as lead gen for these gyms that know how to create an amazing community, they just don't know how to get in front of the right people? And then could we raise as much money as we can for a cause? And over the years, we've had a lot of people, we've had over 1,500 people do the program. And so, yes, we get a lot of unique questions, as you can imagine. But, I think if I look at over the years, those 1,500 people, the ones that really stay with us and the ones that stick did it more because of the cause than less because of vanity, right? And like, I'd be lying if I would say that we don't have some people that do it because they just want to see what they can do. They want to see, how can I challenge myself physically? How can, I want this really cool experience that my friends did. But the ones that really stay with us, the ones that, we see over and over again at the events and help us to build the community, which is a word of mouth community, is really because they have a tie to the cause. And like, I think that when you combine an experience that is both as mentally taxing and as physically taxing, it creates grit that people might be searching for. We have people that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. We actually had a Sloan fellow who was 60 fought once because I did a talk like this. So if anyone's interested, you can see me after. That'll be my one pitch. But really, it's because you're at this point in your life. I want to change. I want something different. I just don't know what that is. And then for some reason, the boxing just speaks to you. And then you go through the program, and I think as we become older and older, our minds calcify and our bodies calcify, and so we take less risk, right? I know a lot of people in here are amazing entrepreneurs and take crazy risks, but like we might just take less risk, physically or just with our day-to-day lives. And I think that this is one of those things that people will do, and it's like, yes, and like once you have that yes, then it's like then it really is like going off the deep end and seeing, how can I challenge myself? How can I do something that is outside of my comfort zone? And then what does that, and then they, take that learning and take that experience, and hopefully they, put it towards other things in their lives. And then they just become, better people overall. And like, that's our goal, right? Is we want people to raise money, we want people to be healthy, and we want people to, live a better version of themselves, be a better version of themselves because of the program and because of what they went through. And so in the time I have left, I'm just gonna go through, real quick, we had this one guy who apparently is the reason why I'm here. His wife was actually actively going through cancer and is not doing very well. He, he was 50 or 48 at the time. He was a lifelong athlete, was a college athlete, has kids, has a great job. Like, everything in life was awesome, right? Everything was great. They were, they have beautiful kids. They live in Wellesley. They go on vacations. They travel. They're super cool. They have friends. And then she gets this a diagnosis of brain cancer right after COVID, and it just rocked them, right? And this is somebody that for his whole life has always been in control. Like, I'm always in control. And this is like, I'm out of control. I don't have anything. And, I think, and he spiraled. And I think a lot of people in that situation would spiral as well. And he actually found boxing for fitness with his kids as a way that they could all have something. And then he did this, which then helped him to really come to terms with like kind of what he and his family were going through, and it became a rallying point for him and his community, because the cool thing is that you also become a gladiator for your whole community, right? So if your friend is doing this, everyone's coming, everyone's supporting, and he actually raised over $250,000 when he did it, and then he came back and he lost his fight. He raised $250,000 and lost his fight. He had like hundreds of people there at the MGM Music Hall, and but for him, it was more about like putting the spotlight on his wife and showing his wife that there was this whole community that was rallied around her, and it was really, really cool to see. And so we usually only let people do it once. We let him do it a second time, and he proved our thesis wrong that no one gives a shit after the first time, because he raised $300,000 the second time, and he won his fight. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I should try boxing one of these days. All right. Next, let's welcome Nicole Albee. Nicole is the president and CEO of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, BECMA, whose mission is to drive economic equity and prosperity for Massachusetts to achieve inclusive growth through advocacy, programming, and strategic partnerships that enable Black-owned businesses and Black communities to thrive. She joined BECMA in 2020 as the Vice President of Member Experience and Engagement. She previously spent 12 years at Fidelity Investments and was also CEO of her own strategic consulting firm, Enterprise Advisors. Join me in welcoming Nicole, MCP 95, SM 95, to the stage.
Hi, everyone. So Andrew's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. I want to tell you a little bit about my idea that changed everything for me. So I have a bit of an eclectic background. I went to Sloan, but I also studied urban planning over at DUSP while here at MIT. And my pathway to running a nonprofit is by way of a bit of serendipity, and maybe I'll tell you that over drinks later. But what I'd like to talk about today is why I decided to lead this organization beginning around the time of the racial awakening 5 years ago. The impetus of the creation of this organization called BECMA really came from a 2015 Federal Reserve Bank of Boston study, the Color of Wealth study, which found that the median net worth at that time of Black Boston households was $8. And that's compared to over $250,000, almost $250,000 for white Boston households. And as you can imagine, that led to a lot of questions, but it also led to several Black business leaders coming together and saying, no shade on existing organizations, but it's 2015, we have to do something, and BECMA was born. So, part of what we do at this organization is a couple things. We do advocacy work because we know that we really need to change laws and policies. We have programming, and we also do events and convenings where we bring together members of the Black community as well as ally organizations in the public and private sector. But as a very small nonprofit, this idea of closing a wealth gap is unwielding, it's huge. And so we decided that we were gonna focus very specifically on Black business owners. In Massachusetts, there are only about 3,000 Black employer firms. And that's a critical number for us because one, it feels manageable, but we also know that Black employer firms the owners are 10 times wealthier than their peers. And we felt that if we can make more Black employer firms, then we could have an impact on creating greater wealth in a very targeted way. And so that is the work that I've been leading at BECMA. It's a little untraditional because nonprofits don't really often think about going about solving problems this way, but I'm a Sloaney as well, and so that's how I've chosen to lead the organization to some success. So blending my Sloan background, even before I started my company, I was sharing that one of my Sloan professor, my thesis advisor, was John Cox, options theory. I mean, I really did spend all but the last few years in the business world, and I bring a lot of that sensibility to the work that I'm doing. But I also have the training from the urban planning school, and marrying those two together, I think, has been really helpful to bring a different perspective on a problem such as the wealth gap. So the way our theory of change work is that in order to build back wealth, we need a couple of levers that we can pull, and our pillars are really focused on 4 things. One is all entrepreneurial endeavors, of course, need capital. This is a particularly troubling issue, difficult issue for our Black business owners. They are the most underfunded of all entrepreneurs. And so we put a lot of focus on helping addressing that gap. A recent study found that just here in Massachusetts alone, the capital gap for Black entrepreneurs is over $600 million. The other is around commerce. So I always say that nobody starts a business to get a grant. Entrepreneurs always want to be able to sell their goods and services, and that is the case as well with these small and micro businesses. And so we focus a lot on commerce, both sides of the transactions. A lot of emphasis is put on the nonprofits and what can these businesses do, and there's plenty that needs to be done. We often take a digital first or AI now first approach for helping these businesses. Many lack solid back office capabilities, but if buyers aren't buying, it doesn't matter what we do. So we focus on both sides of the transaction. As I said earlier, advocacy is another area that we know is really important. It's not just around advocating for policies that we know are important to building wealth, and that really runs the gamut from inclusive procurement, but it also includes things that are related to climate, because climate affects our health. It manages disasters that affect us disproportionately. It's even things like baby bonds. So our policy agenda, which we advance at the municipal, state, and the federal level, really tries to focus on all things that affect how we do wealth. And so our advocacy portfolio is quite broad, whereas our programming is pretty specific to what we can do to help these businesses and our allies. And then ownership. Part of the reason that the $8 wealth gap exists is because the level of home ownership, as well as business owners having very little equity stake in the firms that they run. In some cases, we've found that our business owners would probably do better just to go get a job because they have such little stake and they're earning really less than they would if they were in some higher skill, higher growth industries. So these are our pillars, and we've been very effective in moving the needle on creating more Black employer firms. Oops, I went the wrong way. Uh-oh. Looks like that's the end of my presentation, so I'll just keep talking. So the way that we really want to go about that, I'll give you an example of one of our entrepreneurs that we've been helping. She's a mom located in Springfield, Massachusetts. She had a situation where she was trying to get her kids to school. Bus system wasn't reliable. She started carpooling. She started getting certified to drive children. And then ultimately, she decided that she was going to do this full time and start a company. So we have a lot of these cases where our entrepreneurs sometimes are pushed into being entrepreneurs and sometimes they jump, right? Being pushed is like there were significant layoffs whenever there's an economic downturn. Oftentimes the Black and brown employees are the ones, usually because of the roles that we often fill, they're the first ones to go. And so you'll see this increase in entrepreneurship in recessions and tough cycles. And she had decided that she was going to start a business at that time. But never having been an entrepreneur before, she needed a lot of help with her back office capabilities. She needed help with gaining access to capital. Oftentimes for these entrepreneurs, they aren't going to get a loan. They're not in businesses that are suitable for venture capitalism. And so organizations like ours are helpful in providing that first money in and helping them to make these incremental milestones that will help them to grow. And so ultimately, I can say a few years later, she's doing great. She has a fleet of buses. The last 3 purchases were electric buses, and which is very unique, which is now a competitive advantage for her in her industry. And she's got great contracts with municipalities, including the one in her hometown that was just a few years ago lacking the capability to provide transportation for the folks in the neighborhood. So I would say that the work that we do is important, supporting the development and growth of Black employer firms doesn't just create wealth for the individual entrepreneurs, which is important, but oftentimes Black employers hire Black and brown people for their staff, and then because of where they're located and the people they hire, they also have this multiplier or ripple effect in helping the communities that they live in to grow. So I would say that my call to action is that really think about opportunities to not just support these entrepreneurs just out of charity. It's actually a great model, and it's a great opportunity to actually improve the greater economy. We're actually sub-optimizing the Massachusetts economy here because we have, for those in the area, folks know that we have a skills gap that's going on. There are hundreds of thousands of workers needed to fuel this economy, and they're not here. They're leaving Massachusetts mostly for high housing prices and things like that. But at the same time, while we're trying to retain or attract people to Massachusetts, at the same time you have thousands of firms that are sitting on the sidelines that have the skills and the workforce that we're looking for. So I think it's a real great opportunity to think creatively about how to optimize all of that potential, all of that supply that we're looking for, while also building up our local economic community and making it stronger and more competitive. So that is my.
Thank you, Nicole. It's a great cause. So So, and to round us out, we next welcome Dia Suk, MBA 15. Dia is an accomplished e-commerce and merchandising leader with a career spanning industry-leading companies in the consumer products space. She has built and scaled high-performing teams, driven category expansion, and transformed customer experiences in mid-sized and Fortune 500 corporations. Currently, she is head of merchandising at BBQ Guys, an omni-channel lifestyle retailer where she oversees all commercial aspects of the business, including pricing, merchandising, buying, and site experience. Previously, she held leadership roles at Wayfair and Hasbro. Let's welcome Dia.
There is a question that's been on my mind a lot since I graduated from Sloan. How do you stay grounded in a world that's obsessed with having and doing more? How do you stay true to yourself? How do you stay authentic? For me, authenticity is about finding the balance between what you think is right and what you think is required. And as I've grown in my career, I've found myself facing these questions of authenticity. What's the right answer here? What's the answer that's true to my values? More and more. And so today I'm going to talk to you about some moments from my career at Hasbro, Wayfair, and BBQ Guys, and how I've navigated that question of authenticity. And along the way, I'm going to touch on some themes that I think a number of us are grappling with at this point in our careers. So let's start off with something nice and easy. After graduating from Sloan, I became a brand manager on the Monopoly brand at Hasbro in the toy and game space. Now, when I joined the company, Monopoly was already an 80-year-old brand. It was iconic, but it was maybe too iconic. It was facing competition from games like Exploding Kittens. That is a real game name, I'm sorry. And other things, these newfangled things called Fortnite that all the kids were playing. It was a video game that was taking the industry by storm. And in that environment, board games and Mr. Monopoly felt old, very old. And so we had a mandate to revitalize the brand and scale it. And there were some structural issues that we faced. First off, consumer prices in the board game space are extremely sticky. $19.99, there's a psychological barrier of paying more than $19.99 for a game that could potentially destroy your family. We also had a mandate to deliver more than 50% profit margin for every product we produced, which was the highest physical profit margin requirement in the company. And then last but not least, Amazon and Walmart had just started their price war in this category. And if there's one thing I learned at Sloan, don't get caught in a price war, and certainly don't start one. So there were some math problems that we were facing, but there were also mindset problems. I learned very quickly that people have a lot of feelings about tradition, and they have a lot of feelings about logos. And so there were a lot of people in the company at the time who said this can't be done. The brand can't be revitalized. It's too old. It's just going to continue to decline into oblivion. And so we took this challenge on head on, and we knew we had to do a line extension. We decided to do it in partnership with Nintendo. And in order to find the balance between keeping the core and innovating into the new, we went deep. Hundreds of hours of gameplay across the Hasbro and the Hasbro and the Nintendo design teams. We sent a fairly large group, that's me there, a fairly large group out in person to visit the Nintendo team, which was unusual for the company at the time. It was a pretty big investment. We decided to also develop a product for a consumer that was more willing to flex with us, the collector space. So we decided to foray into adult consumers a little bit. And what we landed on was a game that kept the core elements of Monopoly. Money became Mario coins. The tokens, the little Scotty token, became Nintendo characters. And we did keep that infuriating property acquisition scenario that we all know and love about Monopoly. And so Monopoly Gamer was born. We were also, for the first time, developing physical, downloadable content. So you had new characters that you could buy. This hadn't been done in the industry at the time. And I will tell you, it was a raging success. It was the biggest launch for the brand since 1985. We sold out of all pre-orders, and we got hundreds of millions of impressions on social media. And so this was my first lesson in authenticity, kind of a light touch here, that if you want to stay true to your values and find a path forward that's innovative, you have to go really deep. You have to do the work. You have to dedicate the time. It's helpful if you're in an environment that allows you to do that. And Hasbro certainly was that environment. Monopoly Gamer became a mini franchise in its own right, and with several titles after that. And so that, again, was my lesson that not just applies to corporations, but to us as individuals. If you're faced with a question of how do I maintain my core and innovate into something new, you have to go deep, and you have to spend the time doing the internal work on it. So after Hasbro, I decided to get deeper into the digital space and join Wayfair. Now, I was going to talk to you about AI in retail. It's a pretty hot topic these days. And how we're facing a sort of literal crisis of authenticity where it's going to become more difficult to convince customers that what they're seeing is real. But if you'd like to geek out with me about that later, I would love to. Right now, I want to talk about something that's a little bit more uncomfortable. That is scaling human organizations and what goes wrong when you don't get it right. I will start off by saying, at Wayfair, I met some of the most strategic, some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with, probably because a lot of them are Sloanies. And Wayfair was taking over the home goods industry at the time. It was $16 billion, taking share from some of the biggest and the best. But then things started to go wrong. Quite wrong. And the reason this happened is because Wayfair lost sight of its entrepreneurial spirit, and it lost sight of its core values. Now, this is a pretty common tale, right? You lose sight of your core values, you're unable to live by them, bad things happen. It's one thing to know it intellectually, and it's an entirely different thing to live it in your day-to-day. I was a manager and a leader in this environment, and I found myself feeling more and more inauthentic because of the decisions we were making around people management. And I'm going to share some of those with you now. First, people management turned completely to spreadsheets. We had a mandate to cull a certain % of the organization at every calibration cycle that we did. These calibrations were happening every 3 months. And in those calibrations, managers were more managing the optics of the meetings instead of really thinking about how can we upskill our organization and invest in our talent. Third, promotions became really, really difficult. In order to get promoted to the next level, you had to do the next level's job for anywhere from 9 months to a year and a half before you were even considered for promotion. And so I think we lost sight of that balance between feeling really sure about some of our decisions and taking a leap of faith with our people. Now, I actually got promoted in this environment, but the minute I was promoted into a leadership position, I wrote a white paper in protest to try to change the culture. I know some of these practices are not unique to Wayfair, and so I think we have to ask ourselves as a leadership community, what's the right path forward here? And this was my second lesson in authenticity, which was, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right for me. You either work to change the culture or you leave it, because people matter. I remember sitting in this exact room, watching Zeynep Ton at graduation give us a speech about how businesses have to find the balance between employee, consumer, and investor outcomes. I still remember that speech. I get goosebumps thinking about it to this day, and I hold that vision for my career. And it's part of why I decided to leave Wayfair and join Barbecue Guys. Barbecue Guys is a grittier place. It's a much smaller company. It has a deeply rooted human-first culture, and the organization is committed to keeping that balance. It's committed to growing financially while managing human outcomes as well. One quick example of this is a program that's called Share the Gains, where upon sale of the company, any portion of a certain portion of the proceeds is going to be distributed to all employees at Barbecue Guys, from a warehouse worker to a senior director. And I love the opportunity to contribute to that culture. But more directly for me as a leader, at a smaller organization, I'm able to build a healthy culture and impact the larger organization's culture in a way that feels more meaningful to me. Whether it's scaling the business to be able to enable somebody's first home purchase, to teaching your team some best practices, to just showing up as a leader that cares about them and is invested in their growth. And so this was my third insight on authenticity, and certainly, hopefully not my last, which is that sometimes impact doesn't have to be immediate and splashy for it to feel real. I'm able to build up another generation of leaders at this company with that mindset that culture matters, people matter, and they're going to take that out into the world, and the impact is going to spread. And so now that brings us to today. And a lot of us are asking ourselves some tough questions at this juncture in our careers. Is that promotion really necessary? How much money is too much money? What if I can't change the world the way I wanted to because my back hurts all the time now? What's the balance between home and work? And as we ask ourselves these questions, Sloan starts to come up. What happened at Sloan? Did it really matter? Am I getting something out of that whole experience? Did Sloan matter? And my answer to that is Sloan definitely mattered, because Sloanies are inspiring. And without inspiration, we can't ask ourselves hard questions, and we can't seek the right answers. I remember being at Sloan and being so inspired by somebody's intelligence in a DMD class. I remember hearing somebody's vision to change their industry and actually believing that they could do it. And I remember entering a team flow state with my core team and being so inspired by them. Shout out to the Ballrons and our WhatsApp group 10 years later, going strong. Without that inspiration, you can't ask those hard questions. And so 10 years ago, when I was graduating, I asked myself, what does it mean for my work to have meaning? And here, now today, I answer that question with another question, which is, whom does my work benefit other than myself? And if I can answer that question in a way that feels true to me, I know I'm on the right path. And if you can answer that question in a way that feels true to you, so are you. So let's take this time in our reunion to get reconnected, re-inspired, and let's refuel the next stage of our growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dia. Let's give another round of applause to our speakers. How about those stories? Very, very inspirational. I hope that you all enjoyed the talks. As we look ahead to the weekend, we have another great lineup of sessions tomorrow, and right back here in Wong Auditorium and at E62. We'll end the day Saturday evening with our tradition of C function over in E62 again. So tonight, if you are registered for the class dinners, don't forget to bring your name badge. That is your ticket to admission. We will see you at the Omni Hotel Seaport. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for coming.